So I would like to welcome you first of all here and thank the festival for giving us the opportunity, and of course also thank our dear guests who some of them had really a far way to travel to come here. I heard 20 hours, and something like 24 hours. Okay, so we are very grateful to have everybody here. My name is Viola Shafiq. I'm a filmmaker, curator, and film scholar, and I work with the Doc Campus. And I was asked to moderate this session. We'll start with a lady first, Irit Neidhardt, who is, I will give very brief introduction, and of course you can check the abundant information about the different involved persons in the catalog if you want. So Irit Neidhardt, to make it very short, is a distributor and a co-producer based in Germany, and she focuses in her work only on Middle Eastern cinemas. Then we have Nadim Mishlawi from Lebanon, who is here with a film. His film is actually running right now in 30 minutes, and he will leave us earlier because of the screening of his film. The film is called Sector Zero, but Nadim is also involved in LB Studios and is, what is very interesting, also a composer for film music. Then we have Al-Muhanna. He is Kuwaiti American based in Kuwait and is a co-producer also for creative documentaries, but also, well, he's trying to kind of develop documentaries in the Middle East. And then last but not least, the head of programming at Al Jazeera, Mustafa Nagy. He comes from Egypt but is based in Qatar. It's Al Jazeera English, right?
Jazeera documentary
channel. But there is a lot of information about him, but you know, to make it very short, we are very happy to have you all. The basic question of our session was, did the Arab Spring really bring something new to the documentary field in the Arab world? And also to the field of international co-production. We will try to ask this, to put this question to our guests, and we will start first of all with Irit. Irit, I would like to ask you about you as a co-producer for Arab films, and even though you focus, and we are going to discuss this later, largely on creative documentaries and not so much on the type of documentary that is, for example, produced by Al Jazeera Documentary and disseminated by Al Jazeera Documentary. I would like to ask Irit about her general impression of the market for the kind of documentaries she produces, the audiences for which her films are made, and also if she sees a difference before and after the Arab Spring.
Hello. It's a super complex question that could fill books and books. The question before and after the Arab Spring, as far as my work is concerned, it's not relevant for me, because the people I work with who live in countries who have insurgencies, who try to have revolutions, they're busy with making revolutions and they don't have time to make films, and they try to slow down to have time to reflect what is happening and what's going wrong. So therefore, we discuss other questions than making films at the moment. I think in 3, 4, 5 years, this will be an interesting question. Like what was coming up, what questions are relevant in this situation. But at the moment, it is not. What I see as a distributor, being based in Germany, is of course that I have a lot of requests from cinemas and from festivals on hot films, explaining the revolutions, or giving an insight into the revolutions, but for me it's a very vague question. What I see and observe from the films that are on the market, I think the situation with the Arab Spring is not different from the situation with the war on Lebanon in 2006, or with the building the wall in Palestine, or so on. What is happening in Western countries is demanding that there is always, with every crisis, and we call it a region of crisis, so it's permanent. There is a demand to have more insight about this event or spectacle, and then we see very quickly made films which are often, to my view, not very good films. They're informative, but not cinematic, to my definition. And for me, it's posing the question to what degree it creates the idea that Arabs cannot make good films, because the films that I like, the films that I think that are relevant for the region, are often not demanded or not wanted by the festivals in the West, because they're too far from the Western knowledge on the Middle East.
So Irit, listening to you, it means, do you see that there is a problem actually for high quality creative documentaries from the Arab world being distributed in the West? Is there a kind of a prefabricated idea about what, is it that audiences actually want to see what they know, what they think to know about the region? Is it rather that?
Yeah, it's always a question how we define high quality cinema. It would be 10 people would define it in a very different way, but what I think is, I observe a very sincere interest in the Arab world, but of course the information on the Arab world that the West is getting is very limited and reduced to subjects like the situation of women, terrorism, going back to religion, and so on. So people want to know more about this, but oftentimes the questions that are asked here are not the questions that are asked in the Middle East. And instead of asking what are the questions that are interesting for the people in the Middle East, there is a complaint that the Middle Eastern people don't answer the Western questions. And here is the big tension that is coming up. But of course, because the Middle East is as diverse as any other region in the world, you always find people who are willing to answer the questions to the West. And sometimes it's a trap. Some people think if they answer the questions, it will make the communication easier. It will maybe be good for a more peaceful future whatsoever. It will reduce racism, and some just refuse to explain themselves all the time, because the people in the Arab world know a lot about Europe, but Europe is not learning that much, or seems not to be that interested in learning about the Arab world.
Okay, so I would like to ask the following question to Nadim. You as a filmmaker based in Lebanon, first of all, what is the type of documentary film that you like to work on or prefer to work on? And also, do you see that for you, working in Lebanon, that the current changes in the political field, did they affect, your working conditions?
I just recently made my first film, so I don't know if I consider myself yet a filmmaker. I still consider myself part of the crew. I work in audio post-production and music composition, so I tend to see things, I think, a little bit differently. The first part of the question, I think, in general terms, putting aside the current situation, Lebanon tends to be a bit different than the rest of the Middle East, in that it's considered to be basically the technical hub of the region. Most of the facilities, most of the technical facilities, they tend to be leading the industry in this sense. And so we often find ourselves working on Arab films, and when it comes to co-production, we dread foreign co-production for one reason, is that there's always an obligation for the directors or the producers to finish the film or use foreign technicians on a film, which really damages creating a healthy industry in the region. German co-production, French co-production automatically means that the post-production of the film will be done somewhere else with other people who have very little knowledge about the area. And it's very important for us to concentrate on this issue that filmmaking is a crew effort. It has nothing to do, as far as I'm concerned, with finances or with the director. It has to do with the interest of a crew working together for a certain idea. And when half of that crew comes from a country that have no relation to the subject matter, you end up having a soundtrack or an edit or even cinematography which is not loyal to the subject matter itself. The best example of this I usually use with my students is the film Syriana. It's not a documentary, it's a feature film. I don't know if you've seen it, with George Clooney and I don't know who. There's a scene in the film where they take the character of George Clooney to the southern suburbs of Lebanon to meet with some kind of head of Hezbollah. And I think that's the basic idea of the film. And so they take him to the southern suburbs, and the sound design of the film is really spectacular. It's a very, very rich film. It's a film I enjoy very much. But this scene in particular, if the people working on the film did very small amount of research, they'd know that this area was predominantly Shiite Muslim. And the call to prayer which is put in the soundtrack is Sunni Muslim. It's a tiny detail for a Western audience, but for an Arab audience, this is the whole thing, is that people who have been fighting each other for the past 1,500 years have been confused into one pot. It's a Muslim call to prayer, it doesn't really make much of a difference for us. But these tiny details eventually are what create cultural understanding of a particular part of the world, which is the Arab world. So from the first aspect of making films, I think financially, most of the directors I know at least aren't struggling too hard. There are some really interesting opportunities from the Gulf, from the Emirates, from TV stations such as Jazeera and Arabiya. So the financial part has more or less been taken care of, and documentary films tend to be a much lower budget than fiction films. In light of what's happening in the region, Lebanon is not new to social conflict or political strife. We were born in it and we live in it, and we are very used to it. And we've been saying recently in the field, it's the first time we're not in the news, and we're not used to it. We miss it. Maybe we should do something. But we'll be there eventually. That's the way it looks. But I think when it comes to, I'm going to follow up on what Edith was saying, is that it's very difficult when you come from a developing country to please all of the people all the time. And you have the dilemma in your head, am I making films to an Arab audience or to a European audience? And making films for a global audience, I think, is very utopian. It's almost impossible. So I found myself, and a lot of my colleagues, faced with a statement which I can't hear anymore, which is, your film is too local. And I find this laziness on behalf of, I don't want to say the audience, because on the contrary, from my experience here in Sheffield, the audience has been extremely positive. The distributors and the co-producers tend to be, like Edith was saying, looking for a specific, not a specific subject matter, but a specific way of looking at the subject matter. We want to see things in a specific way. And obviously, if I go to any country in the world, the people living in that part of the world have contextual background that I don't have, and so their insight into their own country is going to be extremely different, and that's what I'm interested in watching. I'm interested in watching someone from ex-Yugoslavia making a film about his situation now. I'm not interested in my personal questions. I can keep that for the Q&A session after the film, which is what I'm doing now. So we find ourselves battling this issue very heavily, that revolution, and it is something we've been through before on maybe a different level, there's a difference between news and filmmaking. let's keep the investigative journalism to the journalists, and let's keep the filmmaking to the cinema community. And the approach, the subject matter might be the same, but the approach is completely different. We're much more interested in contemplative works, artistic creation, the marriage of images and sounds and music with the subject matter. It's a much more artistic process. I don't have a problem with investigating. My father was an investigative journalist, and I know the difference between how he would have, and in fact, he had huge problems with my film. He said, "Why am I watching this?" Coming from the background of a journalist, I can understand why he would say something like that. He's looking for facts, he's looking for a specific kind of analysis, which in the artistic field, you know, I want 5 minutes of a traveling shot on a wall. And he said, you know, why am I looking at this wall for 5 minutes? So this is where the split has happened. And I think this is a lot to do with, first of all, the expectations of the West. Second of all, the stereotyping that we've been living in for the past 30 to 40 years. In the 80s or late 70s, when a journalist wanted to use the word terrorist in an article, it would always be inside quotes. Now it's become very common. In fact, it's part of our daily vocabulary that anyone we don't like is a terrorist. I've met several in the festival over the past 3 days, people I would call terrorists. So it's completely subjective. But this is where cultural practice, I think, has its role, is to set things straight. And the second problem or issue is the new media, which I don't think we've understood completely how to utilize. YouTube, all different forms of online platforms, which are much more journalistic than they are cinematic. And so we now have video activist footage, which is not cinema. And specifically with revolutions, the films are more video activism than they are films, but they're being taken to the film festivals and regarded as great cinema.
Okay, I would like now to take this discussion. I mean, actually, we are coming back to it in the second round, but I would like now, first of all, to cast a look at, you know, the general outlook and the general situation of documentary in the Arab world, because the first beginnings of documentary in the sense of filmmaking documentary in the Arab world were actually linked to the state. And so that means, you know, the beginnings of the creative documentary in the Arab world were actually with film organizations created after independence in the 1950s and 60s. And television, as such, is a newcomer to the field, and actually in the 1990s, the satellite television stations, the newly created ones, the most known of them is, of course, Al Jazeera, actually introduced a new, they actually introduced a new era to the region with, you know, the opportunity to make films, and actually it created opportunities for filmmakers to go towards for Arab filmmakers to have to work in the field of investigative journalism in the audiovisual field. And it did actually also inform to a certain extent, or revolutionize to a certain extent, creative documentary as well, or inform it, because many actually filmmakers could not work in the field of documentary. They could not live in the field of on documentaries, and they were actually relying on the state. And as we know, most of the states were authoritarian, and so that means that we had huge problems in the field of documentary to create films that are independent, that are critical to the status quo. So we have now with us Mustafa Nagy from Al Jazeera, who I hope will give us a brief, you know, introduction to the question whether he thinks that Arab Spring really revolutionized, or if we actually cannot say that the real revolution was starting with the 1990s, with the introduction of the trans-regional television channels in the Arab world.
Right, good morning everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for being on this panel with us. And just one thing, Eric just said that Arabs are not good filmmakers, which I totally disagree with her. That's what you said. That's what you said.
It's giving the impression when you do these very quickly made films to satisfy a market. Then
well, let me. But why I'm leading this into, because I just want to introduce to everybody that we are just it's in its infancy. In 2006, Al Jazeera network realized that there is an opportunity there for lots of filmmakers who are very talented, who have never had the opportunity or the chance, except if they immigrated to another country, to actually express themselves cinematically through documentary filmmaking. And this is why in 2006, Al Jazeera documentary was launched by Al Jazeera Network. And maybe we can play the first clip, please. Just a 1-minute clip just to show you some of the images that we capture.
Every moment captured, always on Al Jazeera documentary.
Right, Al Jazeera documentary channel, basically, if we can go to the slides, please, of the presentation. As I said, the Al Jazeera documentary channel was launched in 2006, and as you can see from the images that we've just shown you in that 1-minute clip, there is a lot of cinematic value in it, and this is something that we actually love and are very passionate about at Al Jazeera documentary channel. Al Jazeera documentary channel is part of Al Jazeera Media Network, which is now a global player on all fronts. We've got a huge number of channels, media outlets, so Al Jazeera.net, we've got Al Jazeera English, Al Jazeera Arabic, Al Jazeera Balkans, which launched last November out of Sarajevo. We have also got Al Jazeera Mubashir, Al Jazeera Mubashir Masr, Al Jazeera Mobile. Of course, we've got a huge number of Al Jazeera sports channels. Documentary channel, we've got one of the most advanced training centers that launched just a couple of years ago in the region to train up journalists in the cinematic value of documentary filmmaking. And we've also got a huge study center that does papers on the situations in the region. At the moment, Al Jazeera documentary channel champions the promotion of the documentary culture in the Arab world, which, as I said, is in its infancy. So when we talk about revolutions and what the revolutions has brought, all what it has brought is that just brought a spotlight on that industry in the region, which we have been trying to get people to understand how they can do documentary filmmaking for a global audience with a local perspective, or a local perspective with a global audience ideas, which adds to what you just said, which is very important for us. We actually do that. And currently we work with over 100 companies and independent producers. Some of them, Talal has been done some projects with us as well. And hopefully maybe some of the people here in the room, we can cooperate as independent producers or as companies to produce stuff that will actually add value to the region. This is what we look for. Middle East and North Africa consists currently of, well, it's more than 298 million, with an access of 50 million households. Our current viewership per year is around 20 million. So people are really trying to understand what this what documentary filmmaking is all about. Because as Viola said, before the launch of these satellite channels and all that media frenzy that Al Jazeera brought to the global or the Middle Eastern audiences, the documentary film industry was only from the governments. And the governments, everything was hunky-dory, everything was brilliant. There was everything. There was a surplus of everything that we thought there wasn't. So it wasn't really helping the cause of filmmakers. Just to give you a quick, our reach, and this is our reach by age group. We are predominantly reach more of a male audience. 72% of our audiences are male in the region, and we're trying to work on something there to try to increase the number of female audiences as well. Our main objective is to be recognized as regional leaders among our audience and industry peers in the development, production, and broadcasting of exceptional world-class documentary films in the Middle East. And I've approached a couple of people here because we would like to also, I don't want to say the word teach, but I would like to educate, you know, pitching. For example, I've met so many producers in the Middle East, they don't know what, sometimes you tell them, can you give me a synopsis? And they'll say, I've got a brilliant idea. Yes, send me a synopsis. Yes, but do you want to listen to my idea? I said, yes, but I want a synopsis first, and then I can make a decision. And after the synopsis, you tell them you need a treatment, and so on and so forth. And this is all for them is pretty new, and you know, they don't know exactly how to proceed and to process that. Some of them are brilliant filmmakers, cinematography, storytellers, the works. So we try to actually work on that in the development, in the production, and see how we can raise the production values to make them better, good filmmakers. We produced in 2011, these are the topics that we produced. 30% of it was cultural, 17% of it was politics, due to the nature of 2011, which was we produced over 50 hours of cinematic value revolution films that cater for a Western audience and cater for a Middle Eastern audience, with a bit of what I say adaptation. So for the Middle Eastern audience, we've got certain things that are taken for granted, but we adapt them for a Western audience to introduce some of the background about the region that maybe a Western audience will not be aware of. We've also acquired loads of genres from around the world markets, and as you can see, we've got diversified, a huge range of genres that we have acquired. We've also got Facebook, we've got YouTube, we've got Twitter, we've got our website. Our website is a brilliant place for any filmmaker to go and find studies, to talk about cinema, filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, in a cinematic way. This is our passion. Our passion is cinema. Using the cinematic language and cinematic values to introduce to the audiences ideas and subject matters. We have got a monthly iPad and Android magazine, which also, but all this is in Arabic, guys. This is all in Arabic, so you have to brush up on your Arabic language skills. Because we advocate the region. We want the region to come out with these people like Nadim, brilliant filmmaker, come up with and come into festivals like here, and people like Talal come and introduce what we are all about in the region. We've won lots of awards, from Monte Carlo to Egypt to the Netherlands, UAE, Italy. So, you know, again, just it's something that we're very proud of, and I think that just sums up what Al Jazeera is all about.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. I mean, it's not only Al Jazeera, MBC is also, and Al Arabiya have also documentary channels, so it's not the only actually channel.
We're the only Arabic dedicated to documentaries. Al Jazeera,
MBC?
MBC don't have a dedicated documentary channel. That's only part of. So we broadcast 8,670 hours a year of documentaries. Okay. And the Al Arabiya would most probably be in the region of 200 a year.
All right, but there is, I mean, what I wanted to indicate with that here is that Al Jazeera, I mean, was the beginner with the news channel, but actually that also other Arab channels ventured and started to, you know, venture into the field and started actually to develop at least pure documentary programs and also production, like O3 production and so on.
The Dubai Film Festival, the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, the Doha Tribeca Film Festival, all of them have gone into documentaries. And we've also got a international documentary film festival, Al Jazeera International Documentary Film Festival in Doha.
So this kind of interest, that trans-regional interest, started actually with the introduction of satellite television in the region, which is something important for you to know. But now my question to Talal Al-Muhanna as producer. There is actually also criticism voiced against these satellite televisions and their attempts to, to produce documentaries, is that what they are actually doing is not so much supporting the Arab creative documentary, but they are rather introducing something like Discovery TV or Discovery Channel, which means highly standardized formats to the region rather than actually developing a very, very local and individual voice. So, Muhanna, what do you, Talal, sorry, what do you mean?
I mean, I can, mostly only speak for, the region that I'm working in, which is the Arabian Gulf. So that's Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Oman. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of these TVs are basically their outputs of ministries of information, or they're really basically part of the governments, actually. So you find that there's a lot of resistance to filmmakers going in with proposals or pitches for local stories. So anything that's dealing with local social issues, religion, politics for sure. This is almost unheard of to be able to walk into the local television and pitch this type of project, because you're for sure going to be rejected, more or less.
But you're not talking about the transnational TV channels. You're talking about the local ones.
Yes, the local ones. Yeah. And I think with the transnational ones, I mean, I have to say, so far in my experience, it's quite hard to get through to some of them, because the structures are very dense, and we have this wonderful word in Arabic called wasla, which is meaning influence in a way. And often, if you don't have the right influence or exactly the right connection, you can't get anywhere. Actually,
isn't that everywhere?
Quite difficult. What's that?
Isn't that everywhere?
It is to a certain degree, but I think
not to that extent.
Not to the extent in the Arab world, because I mean, we even have the issue in Kuwait, for example, that certain parts of the Kuwait television, they'll say certain departments are run by Shiites and certain departments are run by Bedouin and certain departments are run by, the Sunni, and everybody knows this inside. And so if you choose to work with, the Shiite group, well, you can be sure that the Bedouin group is not going to be very welcoming for you when you, cross the hallway to present your next idea. So you have to be quite aware of those things. So from my perspective, I found it quite hard to work on documentaries actually inside Kuwait, because there's very little chance actually that the program would be pre-sold or bought. So I'm often ending up working with filmmakers outside Kuwait. They may be Arab filmmakers based in Europe. I have projects with Arab directors, for example, in Germany, in Spain, in Denmark. But if you in France also. Thank you for reminding me. I'll give another example. An Indian filmmaker based in Kuwait, he did a short documentary, about 20 minutes, on South Asian street workers. So, the guys that you see basically sweeping the streets and cleaning out the garbage cans and all this kind of thing. And it was banned, actually, by the Ministry of Information. And it seems on the surface,
Can we get it? Can we get it?
Sure, I've got the DVD actually in my bag. And it would seem, you know, in other places, this is very innocuous or kind of typical social documentary, but it shows you how fearful those governments are about showing any kind of injustice or weakness, or perceived weakness or perceived injustice. They're very much keen on giving the impression that you know, our country's great, and you know, they want only projects that show the country in a good light. So prestige projects, you know, things that kind of show off the country in some way. So we haven't really matured enough to be able to say what's bad about our situation or our circumstances in a way. I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of nuts and bolts producing, in case any of you are thinking of coming to the Arabian Gulf to shoot, and just to give some kind of very short tips and advice, because I think this is the kind of thing which can be very useful for producers. First thing I would say, never film in summer. So never come between the months of July and August, because it's boiling hot and you just won't make it.
June, July, August.
June, July, August. It's just, it's
September, October, November.
September, October, November.
It's a desert.
Right. Avoid filming during Ramadan, which is the fasting month. It seems like for us it's a really obvious thing, but actually I quite often get approached by European.
I'll make a night movie.
Yeah, or yes, you have to shoot at night, basically, something like this. So basically, this just because you can't eat, drink, or smoke during the day on the street or in public. In the Gulf, in particular, it's quite strict. You can be arrested, actually. Mm-hmm. So you have to be quite.
And Ramadan moves, by the way, guys. It doesn't stay the same every year.
Yes, you have to Google online, Ramadan 2012, and then you see what to avoid. You have to be quite careful in the Gulf about filming in public, especially women. You must take a lot of care not to film women without permission, either from them or their male partners who are with them in a way. So this can get you into a bit of trouble, actually. So you have to be quite mindful of these kind of cultural things. Can we show this clip, the YouTube clip, the 1 minute?
From the Atlantic Ocean to the Gulf, exploring the eclectic rhythms and sounds of the current music scene in Kuwait and Bahrain. Prepare to see the Arab world in a way you've never seen before. Next music station stops off in Kuwait and Bahrain. Part of the Al Jazeera World Season.
Thank you. I wanted to show that clip because it was a project which I thought was very interesting. The crew, and this is kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier, the crew for this project was almost completely European.
There you go.
It was a 13-episode series commissioned by, 11-episode series commissioned by Al Jazeera. Documentary about music in the Middle East and North Africa, essentially.
Not mainstream.
Not mainstream. Thank you. Actually, maybe do you want to talk about it a little bit?
No.
Okay.
We've got one.
They shot in Morocco, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, Lebanon. I was the local producer for the episode in Kuwait and Bahrain. You just saw the little trailer for that there. I think they finished shooting in the autumn of 2010, and I had a kind of running joke with the Spanish director of the project, because it seemed after he left the region there was a kind of a slew of revolutions in every country that he had filmed.
The moment
somehow.
he finished filming,
something like this, it was very odd. I thought, okay, maybe there's something behind that, but it was a mostly Spanish crew, and
Spanish Lebanese.
Yes, it was kind of.
They don't like to give us credit for anything.
We had a quite interesting experience in Kuwait and Bahrain. And even though it's, you know, my place and Bahrain is kind of in my backyard, I think it rated as one of the 3 most difficult projects I ever worked on in my life. And I've been producing on and off since about 1999. The thing you have to get accustomed to in the Gulf is that the idea of timekeeping is very special. There's a word called inshallah, or there's a phrase inshallah, and this is kind of like you know, the equivalent of mañana, but without any sense of urgency whatsoever attached to it. So if you make an appointment with a guest for an interview and they say inshallah, you know, tomorrow, it could be 3 days later. You know, it's a little bit like that. So when they came to shoot in Kuwait, we had a very tight schedule. We had to interview different musicians or artists. I think we had like one every day. And we had a lot of inshallahs along the way. And I think some days I had repeated cancellations, sometimes 3 times in one day. So it was really like a project where you had to be really on your toes the whole time. So this is maybe not so unusual, actually, for the Arabian Gulf. The pace at which people are living and working is very different than in other parts of the Arab world.
Yep.
And the idea of making appointments, it's just like another planet. So it's something you have to be prepared for. And if you're kind of scheduling your production, you have to really leave time and leave enough time that you can deal with this kind of problems in a way.
And just may I add as well, they don't like filming, you know, like there's a time. So if you're filming for 3 hours, they expect you to be in for half an hour, and that's it. So they don't like staying for a long time. And when you ask for repeats as well, they really get irritated because they don't understand why. Did I make a mistake the first time round? No, but I'm looking from another angle. I want to take it that way. Yeah, but why am I doing it again?
Yeah, it's a lot of complications, and how the people understand also what is documentary. We had a number of guests asked if they would get paid, actually, to be in the program, and it took quite a while to make them understand that you know, when we make a documentary, it's not like being an actor and you don't get paid. And actually, in the end, we had some artists who refused to be in the program in the end because of that. Yeah. But the director was adamant that nobody should get paid to appear in the program. What else? I don't know, you have any questions?
No, well, I mean, we have a second round.
Okay.
We want to discuss then further the issue of a creative documentary in that respect. But let me now go to Nadim and ask him, you know, what's his relation with television? You know, because you said that you are actually kind of almost opposed to what your father represents, or to invest in, I mean, sorry. To what
in filmmaking.
In filmmaking, of course. Sorry, I didn't mean it personally, rather metaphorically in terms of the investigative journalism. That, for me, again represents something that, you know, we are used to see on television. And this is the first part of the question. The second part, which is related to the audiences. I mean, who is the audience of a film like Sector Zero that you made? And, you know, in terms of financing, you said, okay, it's not such a big problem to finance, you know, a documentary because it's not as expensive as fiction film. But in the end, who pays for your film if you don't have a real audience, or if you cannot connect to TV channels that have a 20 million number audience?
When it comes to journalism, like I said, my father was a journalist, and I was born and raised amongst journalists. Basically, most of the big shots in the Middle East were childhood memories. You know, Robert Fisk, David Hurst, all of them. Jim Muir from the BBC. These are childhood friends. And so I was very closely associated my whole life with their way of work. And there's something very admirable about specifically investigative journalism or the war correspondent. And I think you'll find the same demeanor with good filmmakers, is that there's an undying curiosity about the world you live in. And this is, I don't think you can, this is what we need, basically. And John Steinbeck, when he was given the Nobel Prize for Literature, they asked him, what is the role of literature these days at the time. And he said our role as creators is always going to be the same, which is criticizing the world we live in, criticizing our society to make it a better place. And so these principles, I think, they're going to be the same for journalists, they're going to be the same for filmmakers, for composers, writers, anyone who works in the cultural field. There's something I'm unhappy with, I want to do something about it, or at least give my point of view. The difference is the approach, the methods, the mediums we use. In this sense, it's very important for me to separate things from one another. The interesting thing about cinema is that it fuses music with cinematography, with sounds, with literature into one package. But the essence is filmmaking, not investigating, not reporting, not, in fact, you're even asked to play with the facts. It's our job. These are the facts I'm offered. I'm going to play around with them, fool around with them, play with the idea of history, play with the idea of reality. So when it comes to journalism, I have obviously huge respect, and most of my friends are journalists, but we always differ on this point. My relationship to the real world is very different. When it comes to the audience, I'm maybe one of the few filmmakers. I love my audience. I think they're basically the whole reason I'm making a film is so people can watch it, and always the discussions that are evoked after a film are the reason why I did the film. In fact, so far, the most interesting Q&A was in Tunisia. Surprising enough, I felt very naive when I went there a few months ago, and the Q&A lasted over an hour. It was very tiring. But it left the Q&A spectrum, and it just became a general discussion. And obviously, after what they've been through, they were waiting for an opportunity to discuss politics and art and culture and history and identity and all these wonderful issues. So the audience is the most important thing. How to get to your audience? I think, again, the issue of an Arab audience or a European audience, they're very different, or an American audience, a Far East audience. Jazeera and other stations obviously have direct access to the minds of the Arab population. And so when you do a film, you just go to them, and if they didn't produce the film, you know, are you interested in screening this film on your station? They either say yes or no, and they give you a valid reason. When it comes to a film like Sector Zero, we were aware from the beginning that it was going to be difficult to distribute because it's a very art house film. I'm personally very influenced by filmmakers like Dziga Vertov or Werner Herzog, who were great at the time, and I think there can be a revival of that kind of documentary filmmaking, which is much more cinematic, much more artistic, bordering on contemporary art. And there was another film in the festival, Mark Lombardi, which was also very interesting about contemporary art. But they're very difficult to sell because the audience automatically needs to have certain knowledge to understand it. And I don't think it has to do with they have to have local knowledge. It means they have to have philosophical, historical, psychological, social knowledge in order to understand that type of filmmaking. So when it comes to distributing a film, we're going to try and not repeat the same mistake twice, and we're now looking for a co-producer for the next project, a European co-producer, not to put money in the film. In fact, like I said, we've already found funding for the new film. But having someone who can distribute the film to a foreign audience, which is the most important thing for me as an Arab filmmaker. I live in the Arab world, I speak to my colleagues the whole time. So I'm able to discuss whatever I want with them. But I come to the UK or to France, any other country, that's where the real Q&As are going to start. That's where the real interaction is going to begin. And finding someone who can help you channel your work to that audience is the trick. And that's what we really lack, is having exposure to people who come along and say, you know, I think what you're saying is interesting to our audience. Just cut that out and change that, and we'll be fine.
But where did the money come from? I mean, now
well, we have the Dubai Film Festival. We have the Dubai Film Festival, the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, the Doha Film Festival, and there's also something important specifically with the first film. and I think only the first film, which is there is an essence of the guerrilla or vigilante when it comes to filmmaking that you need to practice, specifically with the first film. So you find a lot of directors making do. They have a lot of friends, you know, I don't have any money, but help me make this film. And I think this is common throughout. I mean, I read Shooting People, I read all these other platforms. It's common practice all over the world, and it's important. So funding isn't the whole thing. If you don't have a good idea, money won't do anything for you.
Okay, I mean, very good. It's nice that you brought up the issue of the distributor, because here we have a guerrilla distributor for Arab films, particularly from the Middle East, in Germany. And now, Irit, tell us, how do you do to, you know, how do you manage to distribute this type of guerrilla filmmaking in Europe? What is your recipe?
Maybe especially not by guerrilla. I mean, first of all, what has to be said, and I think distributors should be open enough to say it, there is no distributor that I know of in the world that lives on distribution, certainly not on theatrical distribution. Everybody has a second or third or fourth company, and everybody lives on giving trainings and speaking on panels and so on and so forth. So I don't think that I'm the one who found the recipe how to make a living out of bizarre Arab documentary films that nobody wants to see. It's I think
you're really putting yourself into
I
not the right light, because you are a distributor and you managed really to do a lot for Israeli films, Palestinian films, Lebanese films, and Egyptian films. So tell me, how do you manage?
No, I will tell it now, but no, I'm saying this because there is this expectation saying, oh, she's a distributor, I will become very rich, and I don't want the guerrilla, I want a big exposure, and I want the market. And therefore, I'm ready to tell the story for the market. What I try, or the films that I'm interested in are the cinematic film. I am a theatrical distributor. And what I think, I mean, what you just said, if you don't have a good idea, money wouldn't help, or if you don't have anything to tell, money wouldn't help. So if the film is good, and I distribute few films in order to be able to get them to the market, there are still some art house cinemas who are interested in taking them if you pack packages, if you convince them that you can bring some audiences. And I think what is important for the Arab films in distribution is to really be with the film, to try to get I always call it to translate the film into a written language for the catalogs, for the posters. I travel a lot with the films. I travel a lot inside Germany, and I do Q&As with the films that I distribute. Usually I work with the filmmakers from the early ideas, so I have the feeling that I'm kind of entitled to speak on behalf of the film, or I talk with the filmmaker about how I will talk about the film and so on. So I know the audience of these films quite well. And it's really, this is coming back to the question of the revolutions. I am working in this field of like sometimes being angry about the expectations of the audiences, like serve me an Arab film that explains me the Arab world and that is talking about all my cliches, and this sincere interest and curiosity, or maybe being lost with the Arab world on the side of the audience. And it's always to balance this, to acknowledge the curiosity and the interest of those who come to watch, and try to also push aside or try to find a friendly way to handle the stereotypes that I'm confronted with on a daily basis, which is not only when I stand in front of an audience after a film, it's also it's my day-to-day. Since September 11th is certainly my day-to-day. The racism, and if I face it, I'm sure you face it much more. The Arab colleagues on another level, but you face it as well. And this is what makes it difficult, but also is the engine to go on, because we know that if we don't communicate, we are lost.
Okay, I mean, we are going back also to the issue of, you know, the type of films that you are co-producing, because you actually also co-produce with Talal a film currently, and the way, you know, we are going to actually then close with this issue. I just would like to come back to Mustafa, because I see now in our discussion kind of two axes. One of them is the issue, you know, how local can you become in order to become global, you know, and to reach a global audience. And we have another axis, which is, you know, to which extent can we actually foster an artistic oriented, an art house type of documentary, whereas actually we as a TV institution deal and distribute a lot of very highly standardized formats like Discovery, History, etc. So what do you as an institution, and I would like actually to have here some self-criticism if possible, what do you do as as an institution on these two axes? What do you have a solution for them, or is it rather that you actually prefer one of them and marginalize the other?
Just the word of axis just brings back George Bush and axis of evil. But there were three axes at that time. Well, we really are into artistic and cinematic film language and documentary filmmaking.
The type of Sector Zero?
I haven't seen Sector Zero, unfortunately. I think I would like to meet Nadeem later and discuss his film, but I would love to have. So, for example, just going back to the point where you're saying regarding the highly standardized formats that we have got, we are trying to be more flexible. So, for example, we have got now within the our channel programming, which began at the beginning of 2012, a half-hour slot, a 1 hour slot, and we've got even a 1.5 hour slot, which was not available before. And we are currently looking at options to look at shorts, so things like 10-minuters, 20-minuters, and we're also looking at things like showing art house and how can we introduce that to our audiences. But we have to be very careful when we're introducing that to a Middle Eastern audience. When we're all here sat and when we talk about art house, we understand what you mean. The journalistic values that you're talking about, that your father, you know, relishes, and we still relish in the region quite highly and regard very highly because it was not available before. We never had a McIntyre going around, you know, Channel 4 and doing all his investigative stuff. Well, I'd love to have something like that to start with. So our industry is very much in its infancy. Our audiences are very much still at the beginning of the learning curve. We've got still a lot to learn. And when you say about highly standardized formats, we sometimes have to abide to that because this is how our schedules were designed by a Westerner who came and did not know anything about what we're about and said, right, this is how we run documentaries in the West, and this is how you should run it. But when I went to Al Jazeera documentary a year and a half ago, I changed all that because I looked at who our audiences are. So I understand Ramadan, I have to have, so, you know, like what I've got now, 4 seasons plus 1. I call it, we've got 5 seasons. In the West, they run only 4 seasons. But I've got an extra season, which is Ramadan. So I cater for Ramadan in a special way. So I've got 2 prime times during Ramadan for my audiences. Just the one before the breaking of the fast at sunset, and one after the Isha prayers, which is at 9 o'clock in the evening, when people come back from the mosque and they come and sit and watch their documentaries. So things like that, we're trying to, you know, like unstandardize that perspective. Irit said something very important here is we have to communicate a lot. We have to speak out. People like Talal, like myself, like Nadeem, like yourself, like Irit, we should be more vocal in what we are doing and introduce what this region is all about. It's not about a revolution. The revolution is only a highlight that made the filmmaking, of documentary filmmaking, a highlight. And we've been doing that since 2006 when we launched. And we're still, and you've been doing it most probably from before that. Talal has been doing it from the early 90s. I'm a filmmaker. In my own right, I've produced and directed. I've worked in British television. I've worked for years in British television, GMTV, ITV, you name it, Discovery. I've done Disney. I've done the works here in the UK. But when I went to the Middle East, I have to adapt certain things, standardize them, look at best practices within the whole industry in the world, and then go into a local level. And this goes back to Nadeem's point of having a local perspective with a global vision. And it's very hard to achieve this.
Films about tourism.
You know, things that are basically that everything is good, and that the government just make that film so that they show the people that everything is good. But you go down in the street is dirty, there isn't this, there isn't that, there isn't that. So people had a very negative perspective on documentaries. They saw journalistic films before Al Jazeera launched 15 years ago. They never saw anything like Yusri Fouda's Top Secret, you know, investigating about, you know, like things like the camel racing and the kids that work that used to work with camel racing. And by introducing such a thing, there was an invention done, and it was sorted out, and it was brilliant. And now there are no little kids working in camel racing. They've actually invented the little motor that they put on top of the camel, and it's very, very, very creative way of doing that. So I don't know if I've touched on all the axes that you talked about, but I hope...
actually what I think is that the question that is looming behind all of that is actually the question of taboo. You know, I mean, we are talking here about audiences that need to, that we need to educate into, but it's actually also to educate them to accept the taboos, for example. In terms of speaking about taboos, touching upon taboos, because, you know, we have two kinds of taboos. There's one that is in terms of the means, the arts, you know, I mean, in terms of the techniques and the language, the cinematic language applied, because here also when you talk about art, there are different understandings of art.
Of course.
And the taboo actually also of the actual topic, because I mean the art house documentary in the Arab world that is emerging and has been actually has been made since the 60s and 70s. Think only of Omar Amigalai's films, was also to touch upon political and, you know, about issues that should not be discussed usually in openly in society, like for example religion and sexuality and of course politics. So we are also talking about, you know, so...
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I'm just I want to clarify the word taboo. Because taboo, for example, the film that Talal worked on, the Next Music Station, this could be a taboo. Music is a taboo to a lot of fanatics that are fanatic about certain things. Music can be a taboo. So the cultures and the different regions have got different taboos. What is a taboo in the Middle East doesn't mean that it is a taboo in the West, and vice versa. You know, if you're talking about certain things about how things are currently in the Middle East, yeah, we are touching on taboo issues and subjects, but at the end of the day, you are culturally sensitive because you don't want to offend to offend is something, and to highlight a taboo is another thing.
Yeah, but the issue is how much are we pushing the borders further, or are we pushing them back? You know, this is a question. But I think we have two.
Talal wanted to say something.
Talal, he's got his. It's your word. But Irit, do you have a very brief comment?
Yeah, I just wanted, because we talked about TV now and the comparison or referring to Europe. In terms of distribution, I think one thing which is very important, I didn't touch upon it before, is when I do the world sales, I have the sales rights I have the films rights for the Arab world as well, and the films that I distribute are often not seen in the Arab world. And it always says there are no cinemas. Of course, there are cinemas, but not art house cinemas, and there are a lot of cultural centers where you can show films. Often filmmakers say that the standard is not high enough and so on, and they have some fantasies that the art house cinemas in Europe have a big audience and great screens and a wonderful sound system, which is not true, as we know. So what we did with some people, with the coordinator of NAS, the Network of Arab Art House Screen, Mohammed Shawqi, and people from Algeria and Tunisia and Morocco, we try to create a network, to enlarge this network and try to find a way how I can give the Arab films into the Arab countries, and they have to, I always call it, I want to encourage them to pirate them themselves, but they need to find a way to lose also the respect of the European distributor who comes with and owns the Arab content. So, because all of us cannot afford it, so I will spread some DVDs into the respective countries and they will have to distribute it. But it's a very important issue, and it's an increasingly important issue to get the Arab films seen in the Arab countries.
Okay, Talal, it's your turn.
Well, I just wanted to add quickly to what he mentioned about taboos. It was very hard for the Next Music Station when we were filming in Kuwait and Bahrain to get female artists to appear in the program. In the end, we only managed to get one. And it's kind of indicative of the increasingly conservative environment that's developing in Kuwait and other regions of the Gulf. Women who are involved in musical pursuits or theater or drama are morally questionable, basically. And so because these countries are very small and the communities are very tight, and everybody knows everybody, and you're recognized by your family name, essentially, if you're from the Gulf. A lot of female artists and musicians, they dropped out, basically, of doing the kind of work that they were doing. I know in Saudi Arabia you have a contingent of religious extremists who actually think the cinema is evil.
It is. Pure evil.
It's pure evil, isn't it? And even
itself, right?
and even in a quite politically democratic, let's say, and liberal country like Kuwait, if you go to the cinema, there are sections for bachelors, and there are sections for families.
Cool.
And if you are caught sitting in the family section with an unrelated female, female who's not related to you by either marriage or maybe she's your sister or your mom, you will get in trouble, actually, for such things. So it seems unbelievable in our 21st century circumstances, but it's actually like that.
Yeah, but I wanted now to expand also, Talal, a little bit on to come back to the issue of creative documentary, the type that you are now also producing.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a very huge, actually, also variety in terms of Arab countries with whom you are cooperating. For example, you're doing an Algerian French co-production together with Irit and you from Kuwait, so this makes already 4 countries. So
and China's involved as well. Yes.
So let me, try to explain to me in what terms, did you reach out also to, the television channels that are your local trans-regional TV channel, or is it rather that, we are talking about really 2 separate fields, the field of creative European Arab documentary co-production field and the field of the Arab television that is actually still doing what they are doing on their, on their own terms and in their own universe? Am I too controversial?
No, not at all.
No, not at all, but we're not, I don't think, sorry, I'll leave the word to
No,
Talal,
it's okay. I can be rhetorical, right? It's okay.
Yeah, but we're not in our own world. We reach out. Me and Talal.
That's okay. Let's see how that works together.
And actually, the moment you mentioned that project, first thing came to my mind. I should speak to Talal about that project. That sounds like a very interesting project.
It is.
Okay. Okay, Talal.
Yeah.
But advertising now for yourself.
I mean,
okay.
You know.
You had also something to show us.
Yeah, maybe we can just put the clip of Fidai. This is a French, Algerian, German, Kuwait, China co-production made by a Franco-Algerian filmmaker based in Paris and shot in Algeria and France. And the producer is Cafout Films. They're based in Paris. And let's go ahead and show the clip, and then we can talk about it a little bit.
من ذا الذي يقول أن الشعور العميق للحرية لا يزال في قلب الرجل المتواضع جدا، متواضعا كما هو خارج هذا العالم، حيث يعمل الناس الأرض، حيث ينهب الناس، يرتدون خرق الآباء، تلك الأنجال المتواضعة التي جاءت إلى العالم دون حاجة بينة.
كي جيت هنا فرحت فرحة كبيرة كي جيت الجزائر. نجحنا من الموت يسمى. الوقت هذاك ما خممتش والو، ليسونسيال اللي راني خرجنا من السجن فرحين. كما قال الاخر فرحة كبيرة كي استقضينا.
على الرجل البائس من الجزائر، وعلى السكان الأميين من السعودية، وعلى الطبقات الفقيرة في إفريقيا، وعلى شعوب عالم البروليتارية المستعبدة، وأنا أكتب اسمك: الحرية.
أنا طلبت فداي فولونتير. فداي كيما الكاميكاز. تروح كيما قال الآخر تقتل العدو، تروح تقتل مهما دونجي أنت هو الأول. فداي.
Just to give a little context, you know, the film is made by a guy whose great uncle was a fighter for the Algerian independence, and they basically revisit his past as a assassin, essentially, for one of the armed FLN groups. And they go back to France, and they kind of retrace his story through this and his memory about his involvement in the fight for their independence. Did you?
Okay, I think this is, we are now at the right moment to open the floor for questions, because I think we now, you know, we have maybe a controversial image which is not actually the worst start for a discussion. So please go ahead, and we have 2 mics. So please feel free to ask.
Hello, my name is Truls Lee from the Docs magazine. I'm making a film from Middle East, but in America they are asking about the language. If you have an Arabic-speaking film, it's not going to be screened. Maybe 2 channels. What about the other way of the language? Making a film in English, trying to distribute it into the Arabic countries. What do you think about that? Do they see English-spoken films by Arabic people?
Yes.
Or do they see English-spoken films at all?
Yeah, definitely.
Or do they have to subtitles
No,
and then it's okay?
Actually,
predominantly.
In our channel, we dub it completely in Arabic. So we
dub it, okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's an oral thing,
We dub it in Arabic. I've got 6 dub houses across the Middle East that I work with, and just touched on that issue, which is very important, is that we actually adapt the scripts. We do not translate the script. This is something that we found very important for our audiences. Our audiences would like sometimes there is a little explanation, added explanation on the film that we would add, or, you know, to put things into context for the target audience, which I think is very important. But yes, we consume a hell of a lot of Western-speaking films in the Middle East.
I mean, I would say actually it's a huge problem in Kuwait because most of the films you get are Western films, in fact. It's quite difficult, like the project you just saw, it would be quite difficult to get an audience in the cinema for such a project. You know, I hate to say this in a way, but the Arabs don't like the Arabs somehow. So,
can I just intervene here? But for example, a film like this, I'm very interested in it, by the way, and I've been talking to it as we were watching it. But this guy, when he was speaking Arabic, I understood the Arabic. It's Algerian Arabic. But if that was broadcast on our channel, I would have subtitled it into proper Arabic, because that's very colloquial Arabic for them. Yeah.
So a Arabian Gulf audience would not go to a Moroccan film, I don't think. They had Nadine Nabeki's movies playing in Kuwait. They had some audience, let's say, but not a lot. I think
it's a Lebanese production.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, you do have this issue of dialects. So the different Arabic dialects are quite different. But I do feel also that there's a kind of internal racism which goes on in the Arab world. And you know, even at the local level, I mean, it's, you know, one tribe against another tribe, or, you know, it's really just insane. So to get people from different Arab countries to appreciate the work of Arabs from countries other than their own is already, it's kind of like
I wouldn't put Lebanon at all in that example.
Except maybe
I
Egyptian
think, you know,
films.
the problem is that we don't differentiate here between also the type of audience. Of course, we have, you know, unfortunately in the Arab world, the problem with art house cinema is that it's still, you know, that we have our middle class audiences who have, you know, the level of education and the interest are, you know, kind of developing, or are, you know, still marginalized. And this is the problem, you know, that the type of audience that needs, that corresponds to these type of films, and that the audience you are talking about that is actually, you know, racist, internally racist, is another audience than the one that, you know, would be actually interested in art house cinema. So I just, in order to differentiate this here. Okay, can we?
What I would like.
Yeah, but we should give, you know, are there any more questions? And then if there are not, then you can.
Okay. My name's Robert. I run a production company called Camden Creative. And we're about to start making a documentary following the Afghan and Pakistani Olympians before they come to London. And we want to capture them at that anticipatory moment. How would I approach that film differently if I were trying to serve an Arab audience rather than a Western audience? As a sort of storyteller, I'm interested in jeopardy, I'm interested in drama, conflict.
A human story is a human story.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, we are all about the humans. And if that story is talking about struggles that this human has in an artistic, filmic way, rather than him just talking about it all the time, if there is a way of showing that in an artistic form, using the cinematic language that we've been talking about, that Nadim has been talking about, then definitely it will have an audience in the Middle East. But you have to be always aware that how can you make it visually stimulating, because at the end of the day, in the West, I've seen lots of documentaries where there is lots of talk and talk and talk, but a story is being told by a storyteller, and sometimes the visual element is not all that great, because our audiences are already educated and learn, especially when you talk about French documentaries, they love a lot of talking. But we're really into, you know, like if you want to target a Middle Eastern audience, you have to make it visually stimulating and have the story told in such a way that touches a little bit on the way that Nadim would handle such a movie.
Nadim, you wanted to say something?
Keeping in mind that Pakistan and Afghanistan are not Arab countries,
I know, but I'm just
and
saying,
Turkey as well, please.
Yeah, I know that.
I realize.
You know, like, how would I approach it differently? But I don't think I would still
Andrew, you're talking to someone, I mean, if I'm going to put my point of view out there, that I have a problem with the idea of the Arab world in general. I don't think we can unify 27 nations. I think it's 27? 22? That's already too many. 22 nations in one league, in one category, like we're saying, issues of dialect, issues of culture. I mean, Africa and the Gulf, there's no relation there, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't think talking to, if you're interested in the Middle Eastern audience or the Gulf audience, that would be maybe easier. But the problems that I'm sure Talal has in Kuwait, we don't have, or at least to a lesser extent, in Lebanon. In Egypt, they have completely different. So I think talking to an Arab audience it's better to talk about specific sections in the Arab world, might be a bit easier.
And think also of the access of class and, you know, education, etc., etc. So it's not that easy.
Why
I think there was, sorry,
yeah.
Mustafa, Irit wanted to have a comment also.
Yeah. No, I would, if there's time, I'd say something to the first question.
Yeah, please,
okay.
Go ahead. No, Make it short, we have 4 minutes left.
Okay. What I wanted to come back to your first question, because I'm based in Germany and I am German and I'm white, obviously, I have a lot of questions, or I'm approached a lot by European filmmakers who want to make films on the Arab world. And the idea of my company is exactly the other way around, because the problem with Arab cinema, and why Viola said in the beginning that cinema started in many countries with the independence and as part of the revolutions is, in fact, that Arabs, and this is all over the Arab world, saw themselves at first through the lens of the Europeans, which were the colonizers. And by the time there was an independent Arab cinema, a few decades have passed, 4 or 5 decades have passed, where people saw themselves through the not very accurate mirror of the colonizer. And this is the basic question, and maybe it's also a bit reflected in the way we are talking here on the panel. The question is, what is Arab cinema? Is there one cinema? If there's not that much money, can there be a variety of films that is produced that shows the diversity of the society, that can create a controversial debate about how people see themselves, how different people, not as peoples, but as individuals, as groups, would define themselves. So also the way we talked here, and I think it's not only because we are in the UK and not in Egypt or so, it's always referring to European cinema. And the reason that there are so many Arab film, or that there are some Arab film funds now, plus TV, which is working a bit in a different way, and I think it's good to have the differences, is to start and create this debate inside the Arab world, and get to have the ability to express oneself and also to reflect oneself on the own screen, and then see and then ask, what is it, the own screen, and is there something like an Arab cinema? I hope it will be very diverse.
Last question.
Yes, sorry, it's not a question, it's more an information, but also an invitation. I'm Sabine from Arte Television, and we have actually a platform which is called Arab World and Revolutions. It's also in the Cross Media section here. It's in page 111 in the catalog. And actually, it's really, you said we need to communicate and spread information out. So if you have a theatrical release of a film or something, this platform is really there to inform about it. We had a film, it was not an Arab filmmaker, it was a French filmmaker about Bahrain, Stéphanie Lamoureux. Perhaps you heard about it, was able to shoot in Bahrain. So there is a lot to discover, documentaries, films, also breaking news feature. It's a good mix, so I invite you to look on this platform.
Okay, do we have 1 minute more or 2 minutes? Okay, so please, there's a question here.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, there's this whole discussion about our audiences for broadcasters, and what our audiences want. I think in the West it's quite the same. Like broadcasters many times, I don't mean it badly, but they hide behind what they say that the audience want. It can be commercial channels with commercial needs, but I'm wondering if there are films now, I've seen this year, like Half Revolution, they're Western films, they're not Arab films, but I wonder if there's, and I haven't seen Sector Zero yet, but I wonder if you have any indication how audience is reacting to the anti-establishment films, when there's a documentary there that really puts on the screen something that's anti-establishment, or at least anti-part of the establishment. Have you ever seen, like, normal audience react to it, and do you have any sense of that?
You have to be careful with the term anti-establishment, I think, because I think it can be misleading. I'm going to speak specifically from Lebanon, maybe Syria, considering Lebanon had and Egypt as well, in fact, a very powerful left wing. And in fact, in the 70s and 80s, most of the films were produced by the left. And so it's automatic for us initially that it's the left, it's the anti-establishment, it's the people who are trying to move against convention who are making films. Recently, within the past maybe 5 to 10 years, we've seen a shift, as far as I'm concerned and my colleagues are concerned, that the right have now taken over film production. And what was interesting about Sector Zero in particular is that we were bashed from all sides, hence calling myself an anarchist, because even the left didn't like me. But that's why I think anti-establishment Half Revolution is against Mubarak, but it's also very much an Orientalist approach to documentary filmmaking. So it's against one establishment and very much pro another establishment. Yes. Being anti-establishment means being against institutionalized aesthetics in general.
I meant against it's also criticizing the revolution in some way, or parts of it.
It's questioning where it's going, but I don't think we're criticizing it. In fact, there are very few people I know, risky people I know, who are criticizing the revolution, again, criticizing both sides. I'm against the regime and against the revolution. But I didn't find it at all questioning it. I thought it was very much, we're revolting, as in we're doing a revolution. We hate these people, and we're asking ourselves if it's going to work. It's quite simple, but it was seen from a very Western perspective. And it was interesting, the screening in Dubai, where the audience came out completely split. The Western audience was saying one thing, the Arab audience was saying the complete opposite. As a film, it's very interesting to see that happen.
Okay, thank you so much for the insights you gave us. Thank you for our audience as well.